Okay guys, so it is now day 5 of the Urban Sketching at Home Challenge, and for this one we are going to sketch a room or a corner, some kind of interior space of the house. So I just want to show you some options here to whether you're a beginner or maybe you want to try something more tricky. So I just want to explain like some different options. Okay, so excuse some of the mess here. But if I was looking to do something reasonably straightforward and not do anything too hectic, what I want you guys to do is do a straight on view like this. So you're looking at like a back wall and everything is more or less flat onto you. It's up to you whether you want to then include some of the wall that comes up this side, but you could just focus like straight on, flat on, so that there's nothing too hectic with perspective going on. But if you've sort of done this challenge before, or you want to challenge yourself a bit more, try and sit at a bit more of an interesting angle. So you could perhaps look more into the corner of the room, and then you've got like the perspective of the floor coming up and the ceiling and stuff like that. Or you could even come a little bit further back, which I think is something I'm tempted to do. And then I might include like a little bit of this wall here. And then I've got things poking out. I've got the sofa in the foreground a bit here. There's like, you know, there's foreground, middle ground, and then background. Another sort of nice kind of simple one that I could do or could have done is sitting flat onto this kind of wall. And I have to get a bit further back actually. But just imagine like maybe just having this wall, like the cow head, the lamp, the candles, and then these kind of funny things like the bee and the old cooler unit and the yoga mat and stuff like that. So just sitting flat onto it. I think this would be better if I was in vertical mode. But if you just imagine like that as like a scene, it's not too many options and you're flat onto it. So if you're just starting out, try and do something simple like that. And then if you want to do something a bit more complicated, try something more into the corner, involves more perspective, more foreground, midground, background. Here's little Tashi's cameo appearance. Unfortunately, she didn't stay there for very long, so I did want to get her in on the chair, but because she moved, I kind of had to make her up a little bit, and it didn't turn out quite as I wanted, but that's fine. That's for later. So I've got my GoPro as usual, and I'm just kind of starting out. I am looking into the corner of the room ever so slightly, but there's lots of layers to this view, which is nice. So there's the back room, and we've kind of got the idea of the corner walls coming up, the perspective there, sloping upwards in the top right corner and downwards in the bottom right. I can't actually see the floor in the bottom right because the sofa is in the way. And sorry for the jump in the footage there. Of course, I had to get up and do something, then I forgot to press record again, but luckily I hadn't done too much. But you can see how I'm just really starting out in pencil with very basic shapes. I'm just using rectangles basically or straight lines just to kind of get the idea in. And the nice thing about the pencil is you can draw through things, as I have with the bottom edge of that wall there. I can't see it because the sofa's in the way, but I've just sort of drawn through there just to help me sort of make more sense of the scene and to get the perspective again somewhat right. The word somewhat is my friend. I know without sort of more rigorously drawing this scene that my perspective is not exactly right, but hopefully this can show you that it doesn't need to be exactly right. As long as it's somewhat right, then it's fine and it works and it's all good. I'm not going to start drawing out perspective grids and getting rulers out and stuff like that. It's not my jam, but if I can kind of just guesstimate it a little bit with eye, and again, also just using that pencil rather than going straight in with ink, using that pencil just to map things out so I can still adjust things. So this is my very bad rendition of my cat from memory because she'd moved, but I wanted to get her in. So please do excuse that. But yeah, so I'm just working from left to right here, and sometimes I forget to do this, but it's quite important with this kind of pen, like a fountain pen, because the ink stays on the page, stays quite wet on the page. With a fine liner, it doesn't really matter. It's like almost impossible to smudge them with your hand because they dry very quickly, but this is quite juicy, so it was quite important for me to remind myself to start from the left of the page and work towards the right because I'm right-handed, so I didn't want to smudge anything with my hand because I just always do with fountain pens. I always smudge my drawing, so I'm just trying to be really careful here to not do that. And you can see as I'm going, I'm adding all the details. Again, because I've got that pencil there that's giving me all of my guidelines, I can be a bit more free with the pen and just kind of go for it a bit more. And I like to sort of add the details as I go, more or less. That's not to say I won't come back and do some more details. So I do feel like the ottoman, which is sitting behind the couch, is not quite in the right perspective versus the couch. I can see that now when I'm looking at the drawing at this angle, but at the time it felt like it was in the right place, plus the fold of the page might have been kind of in the way there. So, but again, this is what I mean, it's not right, but I can get away with it, and it still looks okay. It's only now I've noticed that. When I look at the drawing in my sketchbook, I don't really see it so much. Just in case you haven't seen the other videos, but I'm sure you must have done, you wouldn't randomly jump to day 5, would you? No. This is a Fude fountain pen. It's called a Hongdian Fude fountain pen. It's just a random one I decided to try off of Amazon a couple of years ago, and I actually just really love it. Not overly expensive in the grand scheme of things, I guess. I suppose expensive is a subjective term, but about $25, I would say, US dollars, something like that. But I just really like being able to do thin lines and thick lines at the same time. And you can do that just by varying the way the angle that you're drawing with the pen. I quite like these kind of bold lines that I'm getting. I've realized that when I was a beginner or a few years ago, I was really hung up on drawing with like a thin pen. But now I'm really starting to enjoy the boldness and the graphicness of drawing with a slightly thicker pen. A thin pen is cool because then you can go back in and thicken up certain lines, but it is quite nice to just sort of get this boldness of line straight away, which I quite like with this pen. I tend to sort of hover around a 0.3 with fine liners, but I think I probably could go to like maybe a 0.5 as just a standard drawing line. And it's so subjective, guys, so I would suggest just use what you have until you want to try something else, and then you can try it for a while, and then you might decide you don't like it anymore and you want to try something else. I go on and off this Fude fountain pen, but especially for the last, I don't know, 6 months to a year, I've been really on this pen. Like, I really like it, but I've got another pen on my list of desires right now that I want to try, which is like more of a flexi nib pen. So this might change soon, but we'll see how it goes. I try not to buy too many art supplies. I don't let myself do that, but it is fun to try different materials if you can. So hopefully you guys can tell that I'm not like a slave to the pencil lines. They're just a really helpful kind of guideline to sort of see what's going on. Here I'm drawing in the brick, the face brick wall that's kind of right in front of me. I don't necessarily always draw every single brick in, but because this is quite a prominent foreground detail, and it's just this bit of wall, I decided that I will draw every brick in because I don't think it would take me too long to do it. And I think visually it will look really nice and kind of makes it more understandable as to what's going on here. Like this back wall in this kind of room sort of behind the TV, there is a face brick wall as well, but I'm not going to draw the bricks there or even indicate them because it's quite far off in the background and it's very dark as well. So I'm not going to put too much details in there. I've just put the very empty wine rack on the wall and the shelves of books and the little light that's hanging down, and that's all I'm going to do back there. So I have started with quite a nice bright orangey colour there, but I am going to paint another layer over the top of that later on as the shadow. But I'm just getting the basic colour of things going at the moment. So I am using a water brush here because I thought, well, I'm in a bit of not a confined space, but it's a bit of a mobile setup, so let me use the water brush. For some reason, though, it wasn't really flowing for me very nicely. I don't know what was going on. So I did actually have to get a pot of water in the end anyway, but I just carried on using this brush as like a normal brush. But yeah, it wasn't quite flowing nicely. I feel like I've tried it again since and it's working better again, so I don't know what happened. But this is a 100% cotton hot press paper, so it's quite forgiving if you're not too quick with laying the paint down. It doesn't get too streaky, which is quite nice. Like the paint stays kind of wet on the page for a little bit longer. And this is just a handmade sketchbook by my friend Bernard, and he has used Potentate paper in this particular sketchbook, which I think is a Chinese brand. Very available here in South Africa, which is quite nice. I'm not 100% sure on the availability elsewhere, but I would have thought with it being a Chinese brand that it's probably quite available across the world. So yeah, I'm working around, I'm trying to be logical and using the sort of, while I've got, you know, an orangey brown on the brush, I'm trying to paint everything I can see that colour. Then, you know, the yellowy greens. This isn't a particular order. I mustn't, like, I don't have to do orangey brown first and then green and then blue, but I'm just saying when I have a colour on my brush, I look for everywhere else in that scene where that colour might be. So I've put that red down on the carpet, for example, then I've put it on the cushion, which actually is a bit more orange in real life, but I'm going with the red just to break things up a bit. And some stripes on this bag that's open on the ottoman there. This is actually Moonglow that I'm using as my sort of greyish purpley colour, but you can definitely use like Payne's grey mixed with a tiny bit of a cold red that you have in your set, or something along those lines to make a dull purplish grey. It's just more interesting than using black, like a watery black. It just seems quite flat, whereas this sort of purplish grey kind of colour is quite nice. And it's quite a prominent colour across this scene actually, because our couch is grey. The TV screen, I've painted that colour. The log burner, I've painted that colour. So I'm sort of using the same colour across this scene. So whatever kind of greyish purple that you might mix up, if you've got that colour in your scene, then do your best to try and use that same colour across the scene. So this wall here is quite a beautiful sort of dark blue colour. But I didn't want to do it too dark. And the chair is also almost exactly the same colour. So I was trying to differentiate between them. Then this wall is actually more of a grey and a very white grey. So here I've kind of painted it. It's a bit bluer than it is in real life. But again, that's fine. It doesn't matter. Painting the very bad drawing of a cat there. This is what happens when things aren't in front of me and I have to use my imagination. It just doesn't work. I haven't exercised that part of my brain. So as you can see, just base layers, just working around. And now I'm kind of getting to like, okay, darker bits. And again, I've got this same sort of indigo, dark blue on my brush. So I'm trying to paint everything that is that colour or could be that colour the same. And it doesn't matter if it's not quite the same colour as it is in real life, but it'll look better in your sketch if you do everything that's almost the same colour in the same mixture. Just makes it look a bit more cohesive, because a scene like this could get quite out of hand quite quickly and it could start looking quite muddy. So that's my advice, is just try and repeat the same colours and mixtures across the scene wherever possible. I'm a bit annoyed about this shadow on the wall. I picked up a brown and blue mixture on my palette, which admittedly is very dirty, so it's my own fault. And that shadow is not nice. It's come out too browny blue, so I do go over that later on. But I just wanted to point that out. Be careful with what colours you're picking up off of your palette. Or clean your palette, in fact, so you can actually see what colours you're working with. So this blanket here over the ottoman, I didn't like the colour it was initially, so I decided to go back over it. And then as such, I decided I didn't like this colour, or it wasn't like bold enough, so I went back over it. And again, in real life, it's really not this blue. It's actually quite a dark blue, more similar to the colour of the chair in front of it, but I didn't want that chair to get lost in the picture, so that's fine. And you can see like the wall and the ottoman are sort of like mirroring each other in terms of the colours, which is quite nice. So I've gone back over that shadow, trying to rescue it a bit because I really didn't like it. And also the shadow back here as well, I didn't feel like was dark enough. And to be honest, I still don't feel like it's dark enough. I definitely could have gone darker there. I wanted to knock back that effect on the couch where the sunlight's coming in through the windows because I felt like it was a bit too strong. So I've just knocked it back a bit so it's not so standing out so much, so that it draws the attention a bit too much otherwise. I'm just putting second layers on things that I might not think are bold enough like the first time round, just looking for sort of minor details that I've missed, like curtain poles, pictures frames, shadows underneath things. A lot of this is just sort of trying things out and seeing what happens and like, okay, does that make sense? Or yeah, just trying things out, because every scene you sketch is different. So there's always a new thing to be like, I wonder if this will work. And I spent ages trying to figure out whether I should paint the floor or not, or just leave it white. I felt like in the end, I was like, right, well, I've seen what it looks like without it painted, so I might as well just paint it and then see what that looks like, and maybe then that will help me in future to know whether the floor should be painted in or not. Because I was like, I wanted to leave a bit of white space, but in the end I've kind of, I guess the ceiling is the white space. There's white up there, so that's okay. I felt like it just looked a bit like weirdly unfinished without the floor. So I've just put it in very faintly anyway, just a nice thin layer of yellow ochre. And now I was like, I just want to like add stuff. Like I was in the swing of things, so I want to add stuff. So I added some hatching lines just on the back of the couch there, on the cushions, and then on the actual back of the sofa. And I'm using a 0.8 fine liner here and just sort of going around and really thickening up some lines. And hopefully you can see how much bolder it makes it look. I don't want you to thicken up every single line in the drawing, but just anywhere where you feel like it's an edge that you could put your hand around, for example, like the edge of that couch, or something with a very fine shadow underneath. And anything that like sort of fits that bill. There's various patterns going on the chair. There's this crisscross pattern, and on this blanket there's like some crazy leaf pattern, which is really cool. But I was like, I am not gonna sit there and draw tiny little leaves all over this thing. It's just not gonna work at all. But I think you get the idea of me randomly scribbling with a white gel pen that there is some kind of pattern there, so that's okay. I do feel like maybe the crisscrossing on the armchair is a little over the top, so maybe that's something I would reconsider for future. And then I also was like, I wonder if I should sort of put in the floorboards faintly on the ground. And I actually got up and went and found a brown pen because I didn't want it to be black. I just wanted it to be really subtle. So I've got this brown fine liner, not something I usually carry with me, but I did know it was in my studio, so I went and got that. And I think that helps. I think that knocks it back a bit. It's maybe something I might start carrying around with me actually, because it's quite useful. So yeah, this is the finished scene, guys. I think it took me, I did it over 2 sessions because I started and then I had to go out and whatnot. So all the light has changed since when I first drew it and stuff, but it doesn't matter. I more or less sort of got the main shadow area that I wanted, which was the next to the wood burner there, and the light hitting the edge of the sofa. But yeah, I was quite happy with this. Again, probably things I would do differently. Definitely the white crisscross pattern on the armchair I think is a little bit overbearing. I could probably knock that back a bit though. I could probably maybe put another layer of watercolor over that, and that would knock that back a bit. And then this pattern on the ottoman, maybe I could have done it a bit more carefully. It's a bit scribbly, but I think it does the job. I think it's okay. I quite like how the sun is reflecting on the couch from you can't see the door, but it's a sliding door leading out into the garden. That's quite nice. And again, I think I probably could have done that a bit darker, that rim back there, but it's not too bad. It looks okay. And then, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, the colour of the wall versus the chair is not quite right, but it's just such a minor detail. It really doesn't matter too much. But yeah, overall, I was really happy with this sketch. I think it's, I can definitely recognise it as my living room. And yeah, I think it's quite fun. So I'm I think this is much better than my initial attempts at this challenge in the 2021 version. I think this was my least favourite sketch of the entire challenge. I think it was actually a bit of a fail, but there's some fun aspects in there, and I definitely was trying to get the foreground, at least a foreground element in there, even though it's not clear what that thing is at all. You can see my perspective is just nuts. It just doesn't make any sense at all. So I'm quite glad I've had the opportunity to redo this kind of thing. And I really like the 2025 version of this sketch. So I hope you guys have fun with this. Do remember that you can make things easier for yourself by doing more of a flat scene, as we discussed right at the beginning of the video. But yeah, I look forward to seeing your sketches. Please do use the hashtag 7DayUSK@home. If you're on Instagram, that would be great to see it. And please do join me for day 6 of this 7-day urban sketching at home challenge.